Let's talk about mids. In 2009, showrunner Damon Lindelof told a live audience what answers he felt his story should and should not answer. Quote, I feel like you have to be very careful about entering into midi-chlorian territory. I grew up on Star Wars. I've seen the Star Wars movies hundreds of times. I can recite them chapter and verse, and never once did anyone ever say to me, or did it occur to me to say, what is the Force exactly? This essentially is the philosophical distinction between two taxonomies of science fiction, hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi. And it's through this lens that we're going to try to examine midi-chlorians. But first, what are they? Just as Qui-Gon Jinn explained to young Anakin Skywalker, midi-chlorians are
a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
Midi-chlorians are connected to the energy field which binds all things together, commonly known as the Force. When midi-chlorians are present in significant enough numbers, they allow their host to perceive and interact with and harness the Force. This means that any host, even animals, as long as their count is high enough, can be, at least according to previous canon, Force sensitive. Anakin's count, as we heard, according to the blood test run by Obi-Wan,
over 20,000,
is more than 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell, which we, again, quickly learn is the highest ever recorded, surpassing even that of Master Yoda, leading Qui-Gon to believe that Ani is the Jedi Savior, destined to bring balance to the Force. Release all the blood tests! We deserve the right to know what they are. All that said, there's actually no one-to-one relationship between the amount of midi-chlorians in one's bloodstream and the strength of that person's Force abilities. Consider Obi-Wan more than a match for Anakin when the two duked it out on the volcanic planet Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith. Palpy exerted significant control over his apprentice, Anakin, despite Annie Darth's high midi-chlorian count. And Anakin as Darth became, if anything, more powerful than ever, despite being violently dismembered because he did not have the high ground.
I have the high ground!
Thus having less body parts, and therefore, clearly, less midi-chlorians. So midi-chlorians are an explanation for how Force sensitivity works. But considering what we just talked about, how much does that explanation actually matter? And why is an explanation necessary? Now, here's where the question of hard sci-fi versus soft sci-fi comes in. Simply put, hard science fiction describes stories which have a basis in real science and real math. Soft sci-fi, on the other hand, is often more philosophical, tending to lean on broader sociological, anthropological, and political themes. Examples of hard sci-fi would be Xi Jinlu's Three Body Problem trilogy, Andy Weir's The Martian. Shouts to the potatoes on Mars. Soft sci-fi stories include Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game, Frank Herbert's Dune, and, of course, the original Star Wars trilogy. We can think of midi-chlorians then as a hard science fiction element in a film series characterized by a pointed lack of such details. In fairness, though, we have to say that explanations in this medium were luxuries. Getting into how gravity works on the Death Star and why the atmosphere in a Star Cruiser's hangar bay doesn't shoot out into space, and how blasters work, and how it's possible to travel at faster than light speeds would have just bogged down the pacing. Stuff simply worked. The original trilogy depicted the Force as essentially magic, and when it's described, it's in near mystical religious terms.
See?
In Episode 4, Obi-Wan tells Luke that the Force is, quote, an energy field created by all living things that, quote,
It binds the galaxy together.
When Luke goes to train with Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, the ancient Jedi basically says exactly the same thing. Neither Obi-Wan or Master Yoda mentions, or even really hints at midi-chlorians. Now, in Return of the Jedi, Luke does say, quote, the Force is strong in my family, implying some kind of biological basis for the Force. But the gulf between an implied hereditary link and let's run Anakin's blood sample and see if he can go to Jedi school is wide enough that he could drive several Starkiller bases through it. This philosophical shift in approach, transforming the Force from something that was perceived as mystical and egalitarian in the sense that it was felt that anyone could tap into it if they trained hard and opened their minds and mastered their feelings, to a phenomenon with a biological basis that you needed a blood test for, felt to many people, many critics, as something that was exclusionary, kind of cheesy, unnecessary, and basically simply bad.
Thumbs way down.
Like many things associated with the Phantom Menace, midi-chlorians were and remain controversial. How you feel about them depends on how you felt when you first watched the original trilogy. Did you wonder, I wonder how the Force works, or were Obi-Wan and Yoda's explanations enough? If the answer is the latter, you probably don't like midichlorians. Personally, I think if Lucas had handled midichlorians with a little more subtlety and thoughtfulness, perhaps by, and not limited to, pumping the brakes after revealing their existence and not zooming directly to Anakin Skywalker is midichlorian Jesus, they maybe could have been cool. I think they could have been cool. An explanation for the Force could be cool. As presented, the midichlorians, though, really muddle the affair and create more questions than they do answers. For instance, how do the midichlorians themselves work? As we just noted, there's seemingly no direct relationship between a Force user's count and their power level. So we don't actually know how they work. Jin says they are sentient, and what does that mean? How does their sentience manifest itself? How do they get into an organism's bloodstream in the first place? And also, like, midichlorians impregnated Shmi? What? So midichlorians, as a major plot point in The Phantom Menace Episode 1, are unquestionably canon. What we can question now, in the post-Lucas era, is will they return, or, like most of what happened in the prequels, have we all just kind of agreed to forget that they happened? Disney, of course, acquired Lucasfilm and the Star Wars IP in 2012 for $4.05 billion and has since released 2 main series films, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and 2 prequel films, Rogue One and Solo, based solidly on the tone and structure of the original films with nary a midichlorian to be seen. I, for one, doubt we ever see them again. What do you think?
I think they'll continue to pop up elsewhere in
I
that
think so
wide canon. I don't think we return to them in the movies, the primary movies.
I agree.
Hey, if you enjoyed this, and how could you not? Make sure you listen to our full Binge Mode Star Wars series, available wherever you get podcasts.